Yeah?
This is going to be an hour, though, right?
Yeah, 58 minutes.
58 minutes, okay. I'm going to look for that 2-minute signal, Harold, so that I can get the last word in.
Okay, do it, by all means. Welcome very, very much to Conversation, to a program with one of my dearest friends here in New York City or in the world, and that's a producer of television from the beginning of television, understands it as well, and written about it as well with a lot of the pioneers who have been responsible for it. And that's Levinson, Paul Levinson. He's written mightily on the history of the extended media and that sort of thing, and we're going to be talking about it and where does it go from here, because we're at a time of maybe transition that is coming about at the end of a process that got started, and he's documented it as well as anybody I think there is in the academic world. And Paul, welcome once again to Conversation. It's so good to have a voice of real authority understanding media, as Mr. McLuHan used to refer to him.
Well, I'm delighted to be here. I don't know if I'm a real authority. That I'll leave that to be determined by others.
You are in my book. You are in my book. Every book you've written has been very well researched, very well done, very well put together, and you always back it up very well with conversational annotation and so forth like that.
You know what? You convinced me.
You're a scholar. You are a scholar, sir.
Thank you. You've convinced me.
And everybody should recognize
You're right.
that. And we should appreciate the scholarship that exists in our society when it appears, like here. So.
Well, I'm delighted to be here, and I've lost track as to how many times I've been on your show.
Yeah, lots. Yeah.
But it's been fabulous. The first time was 1998.
I'm seeking out quality all my time. My whole life is seeking out quality. And unfortunately, you got a lot of that, pal. You got a lot of what it takes, you know. Yeah. Okay, enough of this.
Mutual Admiration Society.
Admiration Society. Share your own background a little bit,
Sure.
and then let's talk about the media and where it stands and so forth now in this year.
Yeah. Well, just as far as my own background, I wear a lot of hats because I have to cover my head. You don't have that much hair anymore, but exactly. So I do a whole bunch of things. In fact, one thing that you may or may not know about is
swim.
Well, I do swim,
Yeah.
so you do know about that.
Yeah.
But in the late 1960s, before I started writing about media and doing all these other things, I was a singer and songwriter.
No kidding!
Yes, that's right. And I had an album that came out in 1972 called Twice Upon a Rhyme.
Wow.
And
was that for kiddies, or was
no, it was like sort of a
did it get to the
Beatlesque.
hit parade or anything?
Not quite, no. But it sold a negative number of copies.
Did you play an instrument?
I played a little piano.
What was your instrument?
Piano. But for the most part, I sang harmonies. I wrote the songs. And that album, for many years, was almost totally unknown by anyone outside my immediate family. Yeah, sure.
Is it on the market?
It's on the market. You can listen to it on Spotify, iTunes, Apple.
We're friends, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you got a good family and all that.
Yes.
And you're lucky to have such a good wife. And
Yes.
Send me a link to that.
I will.
I really want to.
Yes,
right away.
I will.
Don't dawdle.
All right, I'll do it as soon as I
want
get
to hear
home.
that. And you've got you singing or something?
It has me singing.
Oh, I want to know that, Mike.
But here's what I'm telling you.
Who were some of the people who inspired you in the singing area?
Well, the
Bing
Beatles.
Crosby?
Yeah, not Bing Crosby. Bing Crosby inspired you, didn't inspire me. Ba-ba-da-ba-doo. Here, I'm dreaming of a white Christmas. No, I think he was great, but I was more inspired. I can't believe somebody said I was inspired by Bing Crosby.
Bing Crosby was a great inspiration for my mother.
Yeah, well, that's
true. And to me, I'm
he was
the hit parade. We had the hit. I remember the hit parade on radio.
It was a good show.
There was nothing but a darkened room with a little red light, and it was Bing Crosby singing White Christmas.
That's sweet. Yeah. I know. How about Lawrence Welk?
Lawrence Welk.
Did you like him?
No, Lawrence Welk was later.
A wonderful. Let's hear it for the girls.
Frank Sinatra. He could kick it.
Absolutely. Yeah. However, I enjoy those guys, but my music is more like the Beatles, circa Rubber Soul, one of their best albums.
Were you in Woodstock? Did
No,
you go to Woodstock?
I didn't. I passed on it. My wife and I we weren't
How
married
could you
then
miss Woodstock?
because we didn't know how great it would be until after it took place. This is
600,000 spontaneous crazies.
That's right. But after,
how could you miss something
I know.
like that when it's
this is one of the
presented right
reasons
for you to go to, just down the road.
I know.
You didn't have to cross the whole continent.
No,
You
you're right.
didn't have to
We could have just
and
driven
you
up.
didn't get to Woodstock and you claim you were a musical
I feel
nature?
terrible. I know.
Richie
well,
Havens?
as
You know
a
Richie Havens?
Of course, I know Richie Havens. There's an old train about. Anyway,
that sounds like Lawrence Welk. Are you Lawrence Welk type? Lawrence Welk, no?
No, here's Richie Havens.
I do. And the 2 and the 3. Is that what you were? Is that the era you were in?
Lawrence Welk?
Lawrence Welk.
No, I was actually, the truth of the matter is, do you know who my favorite of those old time singers were?
No, this is it. Everybody, write it down. Get it right. There's young people watching.
I know that.
A lot of young people. I want the young people to get paper and pencil and get the inside track on where the real music scene was when he was into it. Well, who was
Perry Como.
Perry Como, he had a pretty good
and Dean Martin. If you want to talk about this, when the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie, that's amore.
Hey, sing it, man.
That's amore.
That's good.
Anyway, but that's not what my album was about.
No,
okay, and let me. Here's,
what was your album?
This was Twice Upon a Rhyme. It had songs for like Looking for Sunsets in the early morning. Another big hit.
You made songs
Today's
up?
Just yes.
You were a song creator.
Yes, that's
Not
right.
only just
a
singer of songs already done by
That's
somebody
right.
else.
That's right.
You're creative in
Exactly. But here's what this is all
Did you
leading to.
record it? Is it all down on the record?
Of course.
Akashic record?
Yes.
It's there for the whole world to take.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, good.
A couple of weeks ago, I signed a contract with a small record label in upstate New York.
The Return.
Old Bear Records,
Yeah,
right. They're reissuing Twice Upon a Rhyme, and they're recording a brand new album with me, and all the songs will be science fiction related, sort of folk rock, psychedelic science fiction related.
And he was also a really close friend of Marshall McLuHan.
That's right.
Yeah. Marshall McLuHan was a giant in terms of understanding the media.
What
music did Marshall like? Can you remember? He would have been more Perry Como, or no, Bing Crosby.
I would say Marshall.
Lawrence.
Not Lawrence Welk. No, Marshall.
Not Lawrence Welk. I was thinking of some others.
Marshall McLuHan would have liked, the music from the 30s and the 40s.
Yeah.
He would have, definitely Sinatra.
Yeah.
The Glenn Miller Orchestra. That kind of thing, that big band music.
What about all the classics and stuff?
I mean, like Mozart?
Mozart?
Yeah, he probably did.
Did you?
Yes.
Did you take cues from the masters?
Well, their themes do show up in rock music, and in lots of Beatles songs. So you think
yourself as like a rock star?
A rock. No, because I was never a star.
Not a star.
Not a star, but
not a star.
A minor
player.
A minor rock artist.
Yeah.
But there's still time for me to become a star.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens.
You think you can hit the big time on white?
I hit the big time.
Well, okay. Well, that's all good. I
knew you didn't know that.
But
that's why I told you.
Surprise.
There you go.
Because I had you associated with all kinds of
I know.
Tomes that were really worth reading and disciplined research in a very disciplined kind of way. It would need, I say, like maybe a little state or something.
No.
I didn't know you were a rock and roll guy. You didn't seem to have that quality. As I remember.
My God! Listen, I'll tell you how that all came about.
How did they come
the shift from rock and music to writing. I just wrote a little article about this, and there's also a piece on my blog about this. The Village Voice, as you may know, basically closed shop. In September.
Oh,
gosh. The end of September, and they go back to the mid 1950s, and they had some great. You probably interviewed some of these people. Nat Hentoff, a great proponent of freedom of speech.
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I could have. Yeah.
Anyhow, here is why I was so moved when the Village Voice closed shop. In 1971.
They're 2 years after Woodstock.
Right. at that point, I was recording Twice Upon a Rhyme in the studios. I thought of myself
Were
not
you
as
in a professional studio?
Yeah, of course.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay,
I was recording it. Although the way I recorded it is, I made a deal with the studio owners, which I said, I don't have enough money to pay you, but I'll give you a percentage of the album
Sounds
sales.
like a New York City
They
story,
said, great
but
idea,
yeah,
great
yeah,
deal.
yeah,
Unfortunately, the album sold a negative number of copies.
negative, yeah.
So yeah. Anyhow, but I pick up a copy of the Village Voice, which I read, every week. It was a
You
weekly.
did, yeah. Back in those days.
Back in those
Yeah,
days,
yeah.
and I see there's a scathing.
Like a hippie.
Yeah, it was. It was like a counterculture, very cool.
But you didn't get to Woodstock.
I didn't get to Woodstock. I know. I'm sorry.
It's
I agree, but that's the wisdom of hindsight. I'll take a time machine back there.
Okay.
All right, but anyway, I pick up the copy of the Village Voice and I see a scathing review of Paul McCartney's second solo album. The Beatles had broken up not that long before.
Yeah.
McCartney had come out with now his second album. I happen to love that album. And the guy who wrote the review, his name is Robert Christgau.
Yeah.
He was like, the dean of, he was much younger then, but for many years he was known as the dean of rock critics. I thought the review was not only unfair to McCartney, just plain dumb as far as music was concerned.
There are critics that are very up and hip.
That's right.
Some people, right?
That's right.
Not all critics are hip.
Exactly. So
Really hip, like.
That's right.
Paul.
That's right.
Hip.
So I typed out on my Smith Corona, electric typewriter. There were coffee stains, there were orange juice stains, but it's still typed. And I sent it off to the Village Voice, never expecting that it would be published as anything.
It never got published.
No.
It never got published.
It did.
Now, to make the story worthwhile,
It did get
I was
published. but
setting it
it
up
did-
for you to make
Thank
the
you.
big pitch.
I know.
Yeah,
But don't worry, I'll get there.
Yeah, okay.
It did not get published as a letter to the editor. I looked at it, the magazine for the next week or two, and then I get a letter in the mail from the Village Voice. And I open up the letter, and the first thing I see inside the letter...
Check? A check?
Yes.
Check?
A check.
A
for
biggish check?
$65.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Big
I
time
know.
money. You
I
got
should have
into the big
photographed. I
money.
should have
Yeah,
Xeroxed
right,
that
yeah,
check,
yeah. Yeah.
But anyhow...
What'd you do with all that money?
I was thrilled.
You go out and get... I hope you went out and got, a little bit out of your mind. And
I was already out of my mind.
Yeah, right.
What I did with that check is I took my girlfriend Tino, who soon after became my wife, to some good dinner someplace.
Yeah, right. Good for you.
Yeah.
That was a good thing. Yeah.
So anyhow, they published my letter.
That's a part of Blue. I never knew.
Oh,
I
yeah.
never knew.
They published that letter to the editor as an article, paid me $65. People began calling me, and so that started me
on your musical career.
No. It sort of was the
End of your
gateway.
musical
That's
career.
right, from basically writing songs, singing songs.
Decided
on one
you
hand.
better get into something else.
That's right,
to make a living.
Because here I was like struggling, with my music, and suddenly, all of a sudden,
That's
people
like
were interested in me as a
Hollywood
writer.
movie in itself.
It
you
is.
know? Yeah, that could be a Hollywood
That's
movie
right.
in the 60s. Yeah.
That's right.
Could be.
So I wrote, three articles for the Village Voice. Then I decided.
On music?
Yes. My second article, I don't know if you remember, there was a guy by the name of Murray the K. He was
I do. I remember it kind of.
It's Murray the K on the swinging
I'm not
soiree.
familiar with that. I
Because
don't think I was in New York. That's New York talk.
It is New York.
I wasn't in New York yet.
And also, you didn't listen to rock music. You were listening to Bing Crosby.
Well, I was listening to Harry Lauder. Actually, Harry Lauder, roaming in the Lomond on the bonny banks of Clyde.
That's pretty nice.
Roaming in the Lomond with me lassie by me side. When the sun has gone to rest, that's the time that we love best. Oh, it's lovely roaming in the Lomond. They don't make songs like that anymore.
So he's saying, "Oh, Danny boy, the pipes
That's
are
another
calling."
one worthy
All right.
of a call.
So Murray the K didn't play that. That's why you don't know Murray.
Lawrence
Welk.
No, not Lawrence.
No,
Welk,
a
but
wonderful, wonderful. Let's hear it for these girls.
Yeah.
That was Lawrence Welk. Lawrence didn't play that either. Lawrence Welk.
But
anyhow.
Yeah. But okay, that's very interesting. But you're noted for being such a scholar.
Okay, so I'm getting to that.
How did you ever get through college if you were wasting your time writing the popular music?
Yeah, I know. So I started writing for the Village
That was
Voice.
just a little side art.
Yes.
You were still doing your academics.
That's right. Well, no,
How did you get to be so smart?
Well, that's.
Well, you were just singing songs and doing all those kind of things, to escape the rigors of real scholarship.
That's exactly right. I didn't like real scholarship back then when I was doing those songs, but by the mid '70s, I decided, hey, you know what? I gave a guest lecture somewhere.
Did that after you got married and have to have bills?
Well, that's true
Did
too.
you straighten out?
I was straightening. But here's the important part. I can't remember where I gave this lecture, but everyone has these like turning points in their lives.
Yeah.
And I remember I gave a lecture someplace. It may have even been about music, and I remember thinking, wow, this is even easier than writing.
Yeah.
Like talking. I mean teaching. Yeah. I mean standing up in front of a class and basically talking about something.
You must be a really good teacher.
Well, I don't know about that.
I think really so. Relate to the students.
Oh, I love the students.
You do. You like the process.
I love the process. Right. As a matter of fact, I'm glad you mentioned that.
Because it would be good,
yeah. I mean, I'll just say, you probably know there was a sociologist back in the 60s who basically analyzed from a sociological point of view the academic world. And he said there are three social components to any university or college, any academic situation. There are the faculty, there are the students, and there are the administrators, right? And I have to tell you, honestly, and I tell the people this all the time, what has kept me in the academic world and was gotten me, through situations in which I was irritated with the administration or whatever, are the students. Yeah. They're an incredible source of inspiration.
Well, you got 18-year-olds who are just coming on strong.
That's right.
My daughter's not teaching like that.
Yeah, so I love it.
Got all these kids, 16, 17, 18 years old, coming into university.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
They're just full of energy.
They are, and at all ages. I mean, the juniors and seniors are fabulous too. So, as a matter of fact, much like you, I intend never to retire. I'm going to keep doing what I do because I love what I'm doing. And so, people ask me all the time, so when are you going to retire? And my answer always is never. Because it's just too much fun going into a classroom and talking about things, and in fact having conversations.
I was a professor too. You were a professor, right?
Yeah,
and you
at
were
Fordham
at
University.
You were at the university. Which university were you at? Weren't you in the association with McLuHan in New York, or no?
No, well, McLuHan, what you're thinking of is Marshall McLuHan.
The master guy writing on music.
It's I think
a real giant.
Yes,
a real scholar.
He was. There is I think a fascinating parallel and connection. Marshall McLuHan was primarily situated in Toronto, and in fact,
Center for Media Culture.
That's right. So, but in the late 1960s. John Culkin, who was at Fordham University, invited Marshall McLuHan to Fordham University. Fordham University.
You were there, and Paul Ryan was there.
I wasn't there. Paul Ryan was there.
Paul Ryan was my dear friend.
Yeah, Paul Ryan was fabulous.
He was smart as a tack.
He was right. I knew Paul Ryan through the New School, where I later taught.
Paul Ryan was a dear friend. He lived in our basement for a long time.
Oh, no kidding. No kidding. Bright,
Paul Ryan
very bright
was
guy.
A good friend of ours.
Yeah, I liked him too.
Yeah, he was smart as hell.
That's right. He was a great guy. I met him when I was
up to New Paltz.
Oh yeah, that's interesting.
I slept in our basement.
Yeah, amazing.
We had a basement full of mattresses because it was part of the faculty there that we were there.
That's great.
Yeah.
But so when I had the chance in 1998, which is coincidentally the same year that The Soft Edge was published, which is the first time we had a conversation like this.
Yeah, what was that? What was the history? How many books have you written?
Well, okay, if you add together all of my nonfiction books and all of my science fiction novels, and we're only talking about full-length books, because I've had some like shorter things published as well. But
you write a book like I wrote a letter home to mother.
Right. So it's 17 different books and novels.
Right, and they're all good. They're
Well,
all good. They're all worth reading.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, no.
And these have been translated into about 18 languages, and I'm really
yeah.
proud of that.
Deservedly.
Well, yeah,
that
thank you.
That isn't done easily in the business. I know.
No, it's not. It's
No.
very hard, and
Yeah.
I got some really. For example, there's an Arabic translation of New Media.
Good.
Did you
Yeah.
interview me about it a few years ago?
Cellphone. You wrote a book.
I-
You
that's
wrote
right.
a book called Cellphone when nobody knew what the hell a cell
That's right.
phone
This was like 2004.
And you really were ahead of the curve. You
That's
always were ahead of the
yeah.
curve in terms of understanding the implications of it. Yeah.
Well, you know,
and that's what you're mostly identified as.
I think
as a
that's-
student of media.
Yes, that's
And what
100%
could be
right.
more important in a time in which we find ourselves?
Exactly
You're
right.
one of the major ones, and you know who the major ones were other than yourself, your fellow colleagues, who
Yes.
the real deal was in terms of the people who tried to give some understanding to the contemporary condition. Is that not true?
Well,
You have a
100%
good
true.
understanding of it, and,
Yes.
and association with the people who helped us understand it
Yes.
in a good way.
Well, that's why no one is in
Marshall McLuhan.
right. No one else is in his class.
I know, he was just something else.
he had a brilliant mind, and you would have loved interviewing him.
I couldn't. I tried.
Oh, really?
I would go with Paul. Paul used to be
Paul Ryan,
when he was
right.
when Paul Ryan was when McLuHan was at Ford? No, what was
Yes,
the school? Was it
Fordham,
Ford?
mhm.
He had a year's thing here.
That's right.
And Paul was the one who had the office next to him. He was
Right.
his assistant.
Yeah.
And he would do it. So we used to visit with Paul up to the Center for Media Arts in Toronto.
Right.
But I never could get like what the Yiddisher people say, Hamish.
Right.
I couldn't get with him. You know, we couldn't make a
Yeah.
I couldn't get a connection.
It's interesting. Well,
I
let me
would
tell.
like
I'll
to
tell you
have.
how more.
He sat in a
Yes.
rocking chair.
Oh, that's right.
And he would sit in this
That's
rocking
right.
chair and he'd be talking to all these people. And Paul was his assistant.
Right.
And very close friend.
Yeah, yeah.
Interpreter of
Paul was a great guy. Oh, well, I'll tell you how Marshall and I met, and it was
How
it
It
was the
wasn't
most.
when that thing was done in the movie with Woody Allen.
Annie Hall?
When- yeah, Annie Hall, that
when he
was
said, "No,
really
you know
funny.
nothing of my work."
Yeah.
It almost was like that, and
Yeah.
it was around that same time. Here's basically the story. In the late
That guy's
1970s,
really funny, Woody
he was
Allen.
really funny.
Woody Allen's really
He's
funny.
hilarious.
Oh.
The late 1970s,
Yeah.
I was a doctoral student at New York
Yeah,
University.
yeah.
There was
Were
a
you
journal,
doing media studies?
Yeah,
Who was you studying with?
Neil Postman.
Neil Postman.
Right,
Yeah,
so-
right. He
right.
was the head of the department.
That's right.
Yeah, right.
And Neil Postman, one day, I walk into his office, say,
Yeah.
"You're Neil Postman, I'm me."
Yeah.
And I say, "Hey, Neil, how you doing?" And Postman says, I don't. He used to smoke, and he has like a cigarette like dangling on his head. I don't know. And I see he has like a manuscript in his hands. So I say, "What's that?"
Understanding media?
No, not quite, but he said, I don't know. I can't quite make sense of this. Can you take a look at it and see what you think?
Yeah.
So the first thing I see in on this manuscript is The Laws of Media by H. Marshall McLuHan. Now his name was Herbert Marshall McLuHan, and that's how he sometimes signed, his manuscripts.
Oh,
Not
that's
just Marshall McLuHan.
interesting,
H.
yeah.
period
Yeah, I didn't realize
Marshall
that.
McLuHan.
Uh-huh.
And so I looked through it, and it seemed pretty clear to me. Maybe Postman was having an off day.
A lot of stream of
Yeah,
consciousness.
and I say,
You think you're reading Joyce?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right.
To Neil Postman, hey, I understand this. So Postman says to me, well, tell me what it's saying, and I explain it to him. Postman says, okay, you know what? This is the way Postman talks. Paul,
I didn't
you
know.
know what I'd like you to do?
what?
Could you
What?
go home, write a preface?
Is that the way he wrote?
That's the way he talked. And bring it back to me. So
breathing hard. Yeah.
he just had that. He was actually a really charming
Yeah,
guy.
right.
Anyhow,
Yeah.
I went home. I wrote a
Major
preface.
figure.
Brought it back to Postman. Then, without telling me,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
he sends it up to Marshall McLuHan in Toronto, and basically says to him, "Hey, one of our graduate students wrote a preface to your article, Laws of the Media. Is it okay with you if we publish it in our academic journal, etc.?" So.
Well, you had your whole thing laid out for you.
Exactly, but
now, he would have given you overriding kudos, I'm sure. What did he say?
Well, I'll tell you
what did he say?
Well,
what did the master McLuHan say?
Well, listen. Before I
About
tell you,
your work?
I'll tell you in a second.
Your
But,
interpretation.
that's right.
Interpretation of his stuff.
Exactly.
Including Joyce.
That's right.
Including James Joyce.
Exactly.
Just
So
for
the fact is,
throwing
I'm thinking,
Yeah.
as arrogant
But
as
what
I
did
am,
he say, Paul?
I'll tell you in a
Okay.
second. Basically, I'm thinking, this is the end of my academic career, because Marshall McLuhan is going to look at this and he's going to say, who is this graduate student, Levinson, wrote this preface? Where does he get the gall?
Yeah, to think.
That's right.
To think that I could consider this.
But I come in there the next week, and there was postmen sitting there, like same cigarettes. I was like,
what did he smoke? What cigarette?
I have no idea.
It wasn't, was it?
No, it was tobacco.
Yeah, okay.
He was very straight-laced when it came to that.
Yeah.
Paul, I just heard from Marshall.
Yeah.
I said, oh, really? What did he think?
He talked in that low
in that low voice. And Neil says, well, he liked it. So I'm going to publish it, and he's coming into New York in 2 weeks, and he'd like to have lunch with you.
Wow!
So that's how I met Marshall.
Did you walk out of that room, or did you float?
I floated out of that room.
Did you float all the way down to the ground?
All the way down. It was like 4 or 5 stories up.
So did you ever meet with him?
I did. Well, I met him for lunch.
Yeah.
You know, and then I'm
the kind of guy with God.
Well, it was brilliant, and at the end of that meeting, he says to me, "Oh, I really enjoyed this." Way Marshall looked at, really enjoyed this meeting, Paul.
Yeah, he was very steady.
He was great.
No, he used to sit in the rocking.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right.
And he said,
James Joyce and all that.
Yeah. So if you ever come up to Toronto, I'd love to see you.
Yeah.
So at this point, Tina and I are married. I get home, and I say, "Hey, honey, don't you have some cousins in Toronto that you haven't seen in a while?" She said, "Yes, I do." I said, "Well, I think we should go up and visit them." That's right. So then basically I, called McLuHan. I told him, "Hey, guess what? My wife and I." He knew that I was coming up just to see him.
You got his home phone number? Did you?
Yeah, I guess he gave me his number.
His home phone.
Yeah, he said, and I'm coming up to Toronto. Would love to see you.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that started a series of meetings, and if I add up all the times that I met McLuHan.
Marshall and I.
Yes, that's right.
Oh, of course I knew the man.
That's right. But it was, I got to tell you.
If I could say it, I couldn't get close to him. Yeah,
he was the kind of person.
He was very diffident.
He was in his own way, but his mind was.
It was perfect.
I'd be, I'm walking with him, and like we pass a car in the street.
Yeah.
And whatever it is we're talking about, he just looks at the car, looks at me, and says, "Did you know? The automobile retrieved the knight in shining armor." I said, "What?" But then I'm thinking about it. He's right. He has a point. Because people drive around their cars, they're big, they're gleaming.
Enough. That's great and everything. Listen, what we're supposed to be talking about is the implications, not of the years of 5074 or something. We're supposed to be talking about the implications of all the media stuff now, aren't we not?
Absolutely.
We're not going to have any time left if we talk about all the nuance of Mr. McLuHan, because we could laugh and carry on because he was a great figure.
Yes.
But let's talk about the things in the serve. We did a program with you and Clinton the other day, Clinton Ignatov.
Right.
He's a brilliant young man, right? And he's written very, very well.
That's right.
And that thing he wrote on media and the understanding of all the cyber stuff, he really put a whole year into that, and it's really good.
He's very bright.
It's a thing, if you want to understand who did what in terms of all the things coming up in the internet and all that kind of stuff, it might be as well by a young mind.
Right.
And really focused intellect. It's maybe one of the best examples of a literature of reasonable length and breadth and so forth to describe what's actually happened and who was the ones that really made the changes and everything. Brilliant.
Right.
And at the end of that program you did with him recently, you ended it by saying, well, now there's all this media things that are going on now, and it's now 19 or 20, what's the year now?
2018.
2018 now, and everything. So what's the implication? And you said at the end of that, we ought to be talking and trying to understand what the implications of all this media stuff that's going on now are for the current and for the immediate or the future ahead.
Right.
And that's what I would kind of like to think. What do you think about what's coming up over the horizon, not what was done in the past, but what's coming up in terms of the next month, year, decade, in terms of media and the implication of what's going on with all the media? He said, okay, to talk that way?
No, I don't want to talk about
Oh,
no.
damn it. They never listen. They never listen.
I know. No, it's great to talk
I might as well
about
not even be here.
Right.
No.
No, of course. Oh, we have to have you.
No,
here.
let's try,
But
because
yes,
we deserve it for the young people.
Right,
today.
right.
We do that, okay?
Yeah.
But what do you think?
Well, as you know, and
Yeah.
as anyone who has followed my books knows.
I've read everything you've written. It's all good.
Thank you.
Okay.
But I am an optimist.
Yeah.
And
Cockeyed
I'm not just,
optimist?
an optimist based on a clear perception
Yeah.
of,
You do. Yeah.
of what has happened in history.
Yeah.
And where we've been and where we are. So one of the things you and I were talking about, we probably
in the past or just now
no I mean
in the other programs.
over
the years.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And actually, before even this show began, you and
Yeah.
I were having a good conversation
Yeah.
about the alphabet, right?
Yeah, I think it's going to go.
Yeah, now you think the alphabet's going to go
I
away.
think it is. I think it's going to.
I don't, and here's
I
why.
think the story of human knowledge is not going to be passed down by an alphabetically written thing. We're going to get past the alphabet, and it's going to be translating the languages of the world simultaneously into each other, so that there's a media thing that can be made available to all the world.
All right, that's a good, well-stated hypothesis. I think it's wrong.
Okay.
And here's why.
Others have
Yeah.
thought the things I thought were wrong, and
I-
usually they were right. So let's go down that line.
I'm glad I'm in such good
Yeah.
company. But here's an example from history. When we lived in an age, say 1985 as an example, not that long.
85.
Yeah, 1985, just to pick a year. So in 1985, Conversations was going strong. I was still 13 years away before
my
first
program.
your program. I was still
yeah.
13 years away from my first appearance on the program. In 1985, television was king. Television was everything.
Yeah.
Not only that, there wasn't even any cable television. I mean, there was like local cable television.
Turner, right?
That's right, in State College. Ted Turner was
giant.
just beginning to put CNN together, HBO.
The baseball games began.
Yeah.
And then he won the World Cup.
Yeah. So
it was bigger than life.
That's right. In 1985, I was already in the academic world, and every single one of my colleagues in the academic world had your opinion about the future of the alphabet.
Really?
Yes, and
I didn't think anybody.
Well, they did. They basically said all kids do now is watch television. They don't read books anymore. It's just too easy. It's too attractive to look at a television screen rather than take the time in a book and read the book. By the way, as is the case with many of these critics, they didn't do their research, because even in 1985, someone had done a study someplace in Indiana in 1944.
Bloomington? No.
Maybe, and then in the mid-'80s, like 40 years later, they compared literacy rates between 1944 and 1984 or whatever.
That's usually a mark of a well-educated person.
Yeah, but the literacy rate in 1984 was no lower than it was in 1944. So that was showing television didn't have such an ill effect. But in any case, this is what people were thinking. Here is what I, in contrast, was arguing. That television will always be with us, but the evolution of media did not stop with television.
Right.
Evolution never stops. And as long as you have human beings who are striving to get better kinds of communication, I predicted in the 1980s that we're going to have screens. I didn't know about smartphones or anything, but just in general, that, now television as a screen is just images and sounds, but that we may well have screens where there are words, the same words that we see in print and that we write, and so on. Now, it's the mid-1980s. I had no idea about Amazon and Kindle, where books would be available, electronically. I didn't know the specifics, but I knew something that's more important than the specifics. I understood that the alphabet has a connection to our minds and our way of thinking that no audio-visual medium has, can even come close to.
Yeah.
And here's what that is. What television, what motion pictures, what photography, what all these media do is they reflect a reality that's already out there. So people who are watching us talking, we in reality are talking here, you know, at MNN on 57th Street. That's a reality. Everyone now who's watching this is seeing a reflection of that reality. That's television, that's great. But what the alphabet does is it enables us to communicate about things that are not in reality, about things that are not physically present. It enables us to effortlessly communicate about abstract concepts like freedom, democracy, like the very notion of abstraction. This is the genius of the alphabet. Most people, historians think probably the Phoenicians helped invent it.
They had some sort of alphabet.
Yeah, but it doesn't really matter who invented it. Whoever did changed human history
and
forever.
set the template for what is the contemporary world.
Yes, exactly.
And that's the medium in which the story of human knowledge has been passed down generation after generation.
Exactly.
To the betterment of mankind.
That's
in your
right.
view. Yeah.
That's right.
That's the system in place.
Exactly.
And that's the way of thinking.
100%.
Linear, like Mr. McLuHan used to talk.
Yeah.
Linear, not multimedia.
Well,
linear.
The two are not contradictory,
You
however.
don't think so?
No,
I think
we
maybe
multitask.
they are. Yeah.
So I enjoy reading, I enjoy watching television. One is not knocking the other out. And, you know, I enjoy writing, I enjoy making music. Two very different things. McLuHan, by the way, once said to me, you know, you know, just as you're saying, you're a very linear thinker.
Yeah, he is that way.
Yeah, your left brain, which is not a compliment.
He's brilliant,
but and he's basically. So I'm trying to understand. You know, how is it that you and I are so simpatico, and you seem to understand my work? So before I had a chance to respond,
he said that of you.
Yes,
that's a great praise.
I know. I was praised. His eyes then lit up, and he said, his eyes lit up, and he says, "Oh, I know. It's because you make music." So in other words, because music is not alphabetic. You know, music comes from a different part of the brain. So McLuHan thought that my music is what saved me from, in his words, being a logic boy.
A logic boy, that's
yeah,
what you use
logic
that
boy
term?
are people who like
well,
alphabet
that is
wit.
considered the logic,
Yeah, so anyway.
It's linear, yeah.
That's right.
It's linear perception.
Yes, but nonetheless, what the alphabet does, I think, it's the best thing ever invented to get our thoughts, what's inside our heads, out there to the world. It's because if you think about it, writing does the same thing as speaking. It just extends it much greater.
Yes, okay,
Whereas anything with images is something very different.
Well, that's interesting. That's an interesting take on this. I don't think that's the case.
All right. But this is why I'm optimistic. So in the 80s, when people were saying, "Oh my God, kids are going to be illiterate. We're going into a new dark age."
No, illiterate would be not reading.
Yeah. But I said,
writing.
Right. I said that's not going to happen. And now, if you think about,
it well might.
Well, but if you think about, what about the millions of people who text on their phones?
Well, they'll keep doing it, I guess. It's been there a long time. It's been there for a long time and everything. But I think it's working to the disadvantage of the vast majority of the human society that is not into reading, or not able to reading, or not reading.
Wait,
you got 7,000 languages.
Right.
We're losing a lot of the languages. We're losing a lot of the cultures because we're so tied up with the thinking of the Gutenberg galaxy and about what's going on. That's been the major way in which this, the whole panoply of culture has been passed on, is through the written language and everything. But what it is I think you're going to have, I just think you're going to have I call it the store of human knowledge, is going to be presented in multimedia form, and it's going to be, what the trick is to get over the injustices that exist. Is there room for some sort of an inclusiveness of the peoples that have not been included in the literate culture that has been the leadership of the world, that is now walking with big league boots all over the place. But the mass of the people are going to be included in a gigantic kind of like jam session, a jam session of a liberated human society. That is the promise of the time in which we arrive. It's simply not going to be able to just ignore, as we have, all the least advantaged people who are left to die of starvation or something along the roadside of the people who've been able to be part of the literate society by which the leadership has been determined. And the realities of the physics and the realities of the thing presented in multimedia terms. The big secret is going to have to be is whatever is that the languages have to be given credence one into the other rather than that's what divides the world. It's what is bringing the world together, but it's also what divides it. So people have to be reading Arabic and English or whatever, and that's what does. But if you do that, and if you get it to where they can be simultaneous, so it's presented to anybody in Spanish, or it's presented into the Indian languages. You can include all the people who've been left out.
Yes,
well, most of the people have been left out of any serious decision making. It's all left up to a few people who've sat in long, dusty places, reading all kinds of books that give them a certain understanding of the law, like this guy who's supposed to be our next Chief Justice of the Supreme Court has been doing all this kind of reading and learning all that.
Justice.
The leadership element for the system that's in place, which is now at a pace of major transformative capability on a vastly expanded system ever throughout human history. We're now at a point where with our extended consciousness, Paul, as you've gone into it, it's not a normal period. Looking for something unusual, not just that would be a continuation of the past.
All right,
and that's the way if you want to assume the past and extend it and so forth. That's the way it'll be done, and it'll be reifying the institutions that are in place, United Nations, all this kind of thing. But what it would be is not something that's going to be inclusive of people. And it would be something that is, and then you get a point where the technology is such, it used to be we could afford to let half the population die in starvation or whatever, the way we used to let. It was never just. It was never just in any sense of a real fulfillment of the capability of the human beings and so forth. But we have weapons systems, Joe. It's modeling. It's there. They're there. The tridents alone. The tridents alone. And it's there, and you can make it, it's very clear that they would, if there was a miscalculation, which could happen with the argumentation along the old lines of which interpretation of the Constitution or this is the one that really is the power to the party that's going to be able to lead and all that kind of argument. If it was it would be the end of our species. Now, that's very new. It's only been in our lifetime. It's never been like that. We always had a little wiggle room toward the future. Also, we got an ability to take care of everybody rather than just leaving all the dreaders of society, the people that aren't educated to the language. And it's all in the language of talk and everything, or not in the of writing. It's all written down. And that's where the store of human knowledge is thought to be contained. And if you do it and you present the store of human knowledge and then get the languages, 7,000 of them, translated into one another immediately, so that you won't have the need to read anything. That's what gets in the way of international communication. If you have the thing where they can do it all, then there's a chance of getting to something that can do something other than our destroying the whole species, and it might be the thing that could get the world together in a way which is needed to realize an alternate situation, which is the liberation. This be a moment of liberation, not just another historical moment in history. That's all tied into the print and all that kind of stuff that we've passed on to. It would be a time of liberation, and it would be a time, if you get everybody involved in it, like 100 trillion cells in a human organism. 100 trillion, that's a lot of cells. Each cell is individual. Each cell is connected to every other cell. So in humanity, it's the same. Everybody matters. Everybody, not just a few people who can read some text in a library or something like that, or the story
They don't have
is secret.
They don't have to read it in a library. That's the point.
Okay, no, wait a minute.
So
I'm finished.
Okay.
So that's what I'm thinking is the thing that is going to be happening in the story, and so they can be brought in on understanding on the highest level. Everybody can understand one another, and we got to get over the language barrier. And if the presentation is made, and so instead of it coming out in English, it's coming out in Swahili, or it's coming out in Arabic, or it's coming out in whatever language is the person who's looking at it. You break that barrier of the alphabet down rather than reifying it and make it stronger. That's what divides the world up into warring factions, and that's one of the arguments in favor of that, and that's predicated upon this idea. Maybe we live at a time of qualitative, not quantitative continuation of history. We live in a time of qualitative transformation, which is what I believe.
Okay. All right, so here's my response.
Okay.
It'll be a little briefer, but here it is. What you are describing is going on right now through social media. And here's what I mean. If you think about Twitter, if you think about Facebook, anyone, any place in the world, whether you're president of the United States or a totally unknown person, anywhere, for that matter, off planet as well, because the astronauts can do some of this, can anytime she or he wants communicate on Twitter or Facebook. It's actually 280 now.
It is.
But it doesn't matter because you can do 10 tweets. You can actually write a longer piece and put a link in.
Whatever the tweet is, be a verbal tweet in the Swahili language.
Well, okay.
Rather than going through an alphabet.
I'm getting that.
Okay, that's all. You get rid of the alphabet.
You can translate anything instantly. Now, I don't know if it's...
Well, then do it with the language.
Yes.
They don't do it.
Well, basically...
Why don't we do it?
We are doing it.
We just let the lesser people die in the gutter now.
No.
The poor people of the world haven't got a chance.
We're talking about...
Only the people
we're talking about languages around the world, right?
Yeah, okay.
So, I don't know. I haven't examined Twitter that carefully. I don't know if they have 5,000 different languages available in their translation algorithm or program, and the same applies to Facebook. But I do know that there are an enormous number of languages, and when I write something in English, people in other parts of the world can read it in whatever their language is.
And reading.
That's not a refutation of the alphabet. That's actually an enhancement of the alphabet.
But if you have immediate translation, rather than reading it in one language,
that is immediate translation.
You read it, and you read it, and you read it, and you read it, linear thinking, all of that.
What do you have against reading?
Well, one is containing the history of what's been going before, rather than something...
How does reading...
Do you think, let's say...
How does reading disprivilege people?
How are we ever going to get to a world of justice? We don't have justice. Do you agree?
We have
justice.
I think it's mixed.
Do you agree
There's
with
some
the
justice.
idea that the weapons are species lethal? Or is that just bullshit?
You're talking about the weapons, nuclear weapons?
Submarines of the United States of America can wipe out every single human being. That's scientifically true.
Yes.
That's something new.
Yeah, I agree.
That's
horrible.
Impotence to play our little
But you want to know an interesting historical fact?
What?
The greatest losses of life in human history have not been the result of human activities. The greatest losses of life have occurred through epidemics. So, for example, the Black Plague wiped out as much as 3/5 of the population in various parts of the world. And you see what happens in these horrible, tsunamis and earthquakes and even floods.
Yeah, but currently the only
so our technologies are what enable us to push those natural disasters back a little bit, so people still die from contagious illness, but it's far
There's
more
progress being
toward
a better world. Yeah,
so
that's the idea.
That's right. So the key is using our technology, focusing on it to enhance human beings rather than what you're talking about, weaponry. All of that started.
But that's just one vector.
I agree. So yeah, I'm in complete agreement with you.
No, but is that really scientifically made available? Do we really understand?
Understand what?
That it's the end of our species?
No,
that was only just yesterday.
Right. Well,
so we've had thousands of years of civilization, and we got to this point, and what we need to have is a realization of the qualitative transformation.
Yeah.
There's a thing called a pregnancy with the thing. There comes 9 months, and then something new comes.
Right.
We're now on the verge of having something new happen.
Well, it's happening
already. The old
already.
ways that are enshrined in the old ways of thinking.
Yeah.
Are something that we ought to be bringing into question.
Well, this is what I'm saying.
I think one of the biggest things is it's totally unjust the way the world
is.
Do you think the world is just? Do you think the people that are running the world have the vision needed in order to not have it go off?
It's not a question.
Have we got the leadership?
It's not a question of just or unjust. It's a mixture.
So? No, okay.
So if you look, for example, right now you mentioned the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh to the U.S. Supreme Court. Horrendous.
Absolute danger.
However, note that at this point, I mean, we'll see what happens literally in the next couple of days, so chances are by the time this is aired, we'll know what the result is.
Well, they will have managed to hold on to the power.
I don't know if that they will. Yeah. Are you so sure that Kavanaugh is going to be nominated? I'm not. And as a matter of fact, what happened a few days ago, a few days prior to you and I talking, maybe a week prior to when people are watching this, as you know, the Senate Judiciary Committee consists of 21 people, 11 Republicans, 10 Democrats. And on the day that the Judiciary Committee was supposed to vote whether or not to move the nomination over to the General Senate for their vote, which is the ultimately deciding factor, one of the Republican senators, Jeff Flake, who had been saying previously, no, this is before that. He said, I've been thinking about this, I'm not sure, I have concerns.
That man seems to have class to me.
Well, exactly, because he announced in the morning that he's going to vote yes as far as moving Kavanaugh forward. But shortly after that, 2 women talked to him as he was trying to get out of an elevator. Right, and you could see his face. He was listening to them. And then a little later at the Senate Judiciary meeting, a Democrat, Senator Chris Coons, was joined in, he was talking sense. He was saying, what's wrong with having just a week longer to do this? And the result was Jeff Flake, a Republican, who had previously said he was going to vote yes, said there's a proviso to my voting yes. We need to have this FBI investigation. So when you ask me,
you got 4 people so far.
I know. It's not perfect, and we'll see what happens. Who knows? But I am not as pessimistic as you about people. Well,
necessarily.
When you talk about people in power, if
you
Kavanaugh,
think the power structure in place is adequate to what the future allows?
It's never adequate.
Do we need a change?
It's never.
Do we need a
yes,
change?
It's never adequate.
Okay.
And we do need a change.
A change from history.
Right, but the fact of the matter is, what Jeff Flake did is evidence that in some powerful people, and a senator is a powerful position, human rationality can still be decisive.
Well, I don't have a very good understanding of human rationality. I don't have a very good understanding of what Mr. Mussolini was about, or what Mr. Adolf Hitler was about, or what other fascists that have ruled throughout the past history and so forth.
Well, what
that guy looks like some sort of a mug in a saloon somewhere.
I agree, and I don't mind saying, if you think about what President Trump has done, he's obviously not on Hitler's level. No, but if you look at Hitler in the 1930s, Hitler basically talked about the Lugan press, the lying press.
Yeah, right.
Trump rants and raves about fake news.
Yeah. It's the same sort of a thing. It's
Exactly.
still in place.
That's right.
So all of the systems are in place, the way of getting things and everything. So all I'm trying to do is get at something that says there's something new, realizing. It's like realizing. You used to do music? Did you ever jam?
Sure.
You ever jam? And when you jam, the guy's playing and you're playing here, and then the sax is here, and then the thing is here, and then some guy goes over here on the sub.
Right.
What? And you get to that, and you get to that, and you get. And then you get it together.
Right.
And it really works. And you got 100 trillion cells in your every cell matters. And we just leave most of the cellular system of the human society totally inept at having any say over anything that's going on. It's a handful of people. They argue back and forth like mafia dons. That's what they do. They continue to do it, and nobody's bringing up the alternative that we may be at a time of qualitative transformation. Where do you hear us talking about liberation? Where do you talk about ideas of how are we going to deal with the upsetting situation of our historical conditions?
Liberation is happening right now, even as we are speaking. It's an imperfect.
You think, everything's cool?
No.
No, what are you saying?
What I'm saying is, to get back to Twitter as an example.
Okay, yeah.
For the first time in human history, anyone can express her or his thoughts on this system. Anyone. Now, Twitter came about in 2006, so you don't have to go that far back in history. Let's say it's 2005. In 2005, the only way that anyone could get his or her thoughts out to the world was if someone like you, who was in a position of power, would say, hey, can you come by my show? You know, on 59th Street, I'd love to interview you. Or if an editor of a newspaper said, hey, this might surprise you, I'd love you to write an op-ed for my newspaper, etc., etc. There was basically no way that people could get their ideas out to the world. They may have had the best ideas in the world, but the only people who knew it were people they could talk to face to face. Twitter has changed that, and that's why I'm hopeful.
Well, that might be hope then, because I'll tell you who's really good working Twitter is Mr. Trump.
Yeah,
He's
exactly.
a fast master at it,
That's
and
right.
he sees the whole whole world of people, and that's something that is part of the current situation.
Absolutely. But everyone can critique him on Twitter as well. And I think, look, Adolf Hitler loved radio because there were no people from the press to distort his view.
Yeah, the same thing could apply.
Same thing with Trump. Trump loves Twitter because there were no...
No, he knows how to work it. He's a master.
But that doesn't change the fact that anyone can say whatever they want, including some very decisive critiques of Trump, of Kavanaugh as a nominee, etc., etc.
Okay, well, one thing is the problem is we run out of time. We haven't got enough time. Look, they're running the thing again.
Hey, looks good.
And anyway, I still think the story of human knowledge is going to be put with and the institution that we got to get over is the alphabet. I think we're going to get rid of that. We're going to be able to get the people all included, and let's hope we can pull it off. Thank you for viewing. Okay, like that, we only got started on it. And thank you, Paul. Always good to see you.
Same here.
So, thank you for viewing. We'll be coming back again tomorrow. So that's it. Thanks, Josiane, for the work, putting it together. And I see we got another program coming up, so we got to deal with that. But thanks a lot. We only begun to talk.
All right, good. Well,
we got to run this down a little bit more, maybe over a beer.
Good.
Okay?
And I warmed you up.